Fear is an automatic response in your brain to perceived scary shit. But fear itself is not under your conscious control. It is automatic, and if it's automatic, then that is not you. It is a thing your brain does, but it is not a thing that you do, conscious you. So presumably, there's stuff in your brain you don't control, and then there's stuff in your brain that you do control. Stuff that is you. Let's find out where the line is then, shall we? Well, for most of the day so far, you've been blinking and breathing automatically. Congratulations, keep it up, but now you're thinking about it, so you're doing it manually. Anyway, you'll forget about it in a few minutes, and all of that will become automatic again. So that is not you. Okay, what next? Well, what about the things you like? Surely we choose those. Let's say your music taste, for example. Good music activates the part of the brain dealing with euphoric reward response, or the bit that makes you feel nice. Okay, fine, but did you choose to prefer Metallica over Beethoven, or over the blood-curdling sound of two cats banging outside? No, obviously not, otherwise you just choose to prefer everything. Even though you can choose what to listen to, the preference itself, what presses your musical, or foodish, or social buttons, is out of your control. So that is also not you. Okay, so we'll push the line over a bit more. You don't control what scares you, you don't control basic survival stuff, you don't control what you enjoy. So okay, but at least you can choose what your brain is processing, right? Where to put your mind. Yeah, well, not always. If you're a native English speaker or just fluent in English, you're not choosing to understand these words, are you? They're just coming in and your brain is doing the work for you. Like, try to hear these syllables without the meaning. An adequate kitchen. A stationary football. Two cats reenacting a scene from the motion picture Titanic, having provided a rubber ring for the mice. An anthropomorphized dog off for his final exam before qualifying as a lumberjack. A man successfully combining his responsibilities as an accountant with his love of nautical tourism. A man with a hitherto unexplained eye condition attempting to play a piece of music on the abacus while not gripping the abacus correctly. And a doctor who is about to destroy a burger as well as the majority of his left hand with the help of, if I am not mistaken, a silenced Walther PPK. It's impossible because language processing, when you're good enough, is automatic. So that is not you. Okay, Jesus, but what about high-level stuff? What about playing instruments or driving a car? That must take awareness. That can't be automatic. Yeah, okay, probably, for the first while. But if you play an instrument, you may have noticed your fingers just know what they're doing, automatically. Or if you drive, you know it's possible to get from A to B in a car and spend the entire time having an argument in your head with your dad because he still hasn't bought you that fucking Etch-a-Sketch, while never actually thinking about changing gear or pushing the pedals. So high-level motor coordination, when you practice it, can be completely automatic too. Yeah, okay, but at least simple motor tasks are in your control, moving a hand or a leg or whatever. Yeah, or not. Very simply, Benjamin Libet did a fairly famous experiment with getting people to press a button randomly when they felt like it. He was monitoring their brain activity while they did this. The weird thing is that the brain seemed to be preparing to push the button a disturbing length of time before people were reporting choosing to press the button itself. There are problems with this experiment for sure, but it does seem a bit like the systems underneath you, underneath being conscious, might be way more essential than the conscious systems themselves, and that choosing to do stuff is maybe just a game the brain plays afterwards to justify what it was already going to do anyway. Maybe. Okay, so fear isn't you, survival stuff isn't you, preference isn't you, lots of motor control isn't you. Christ, what else is going on in there that isn't you? Well, a fair bit actually, like, balancing when you walk, or falling asleep and waking up, or remembering who you are, or where you are, or when you are, or fetching memories in the first place, or taking all of the perceptions that are coming in through your senses and turning them into a coherent picture of the world that actually makes fucking sense, or even just processing everything at the same time, or processing text, or perceiving color, or just pretty much anything. Most of it is automatic, or at least not mediated by you consciously. Is there anything in your brain that you do control then, you silly, clever mess? Yeah, let's start by you closing your eyes. Go on. Are they closed? They bloody better be. Nothing nasty is going to come up on the screen or anything. Alright? Closed? Cool. If you listen to my voice for a moment and just try to ignore how grating and pretentious it is, if you put everything else out of your mind, all the anxieties and the neuroses, all the sensations of your body, you will find that underneath all of that is nothing but awareness. There's no obvious you on the inside, there's no tiny cat pulling levers and pressing buttons, there's no center to being conscious. It's just presence, it's just awareness. There are sensations and awareness of sensations, and then processes, probably most of them automatic. You, as a thing, don't seem to have a center if you look for one. You conscious you do not really exist, not concretely, to be very simple about it. That is the idea, anyway. Go on then, open your eyes, you scallywag. Another automatic process in the brain might be the system that says, I am a thing with a centered self. There is something on the inside doing the experiencing, and it is me. But maybe there isn't. Maybe there just fucking isn't. And what then? Well, insulting sign-off followed by jaunty classical music. To widzę. Hang on a second. Look, even if you are kind of a lie, which you might be, me too, you are still self-aware, whatever happens. And that is pretty unique. We don't know how self-aware other animals are. Almost no animals recognize their reflection for some reason, except maybe some of the great apes, possibly dolphins, elephants, and magpies for some reason. But a bigger question is if there are other species in the universe, and there probably are, and if they've been around a while, and they probably have, are they self-aware? We always seem to make out that advanced aliens will have gone down similar lines to us, starting as cells, going up and up, building fast food joints, smoking doobies, etc. But would they be self-aware necessarily? Like, maybe evolution accidentally made some higher mammals on Earth self-aware because it's better for problem solving or something in this one case. Maybe it was just one of those weird drunken experiments nature undertakes sometimes, like platypuses or Winchester. Maybe we just got really lucky. This might be a one-time trick in the universe and we got to take it for a test drive. And that really gets one thinking, because what we need is a global holiday, and we'll call it Being Alive is Fucking Cool Day, where everyone gets the day off and just for a bit, even for a few hours, takes the time to remember that everyone you meet, however shit, is kind of a miracle in plain sight. And on Global Being Alive is Fucking Cool Day, we'll all eat donuts and take leisurely strolls in the park and be cool to everyone, and around 3 o'clock solemnly put our hands on our hearts and pledge the following: that as the sperm that won the race, as the mud that woke up, as a blob of carbon currently taking the shape of a human, I do declare that the world is fucking cool and being self-aware is fucking cool. And I shall henceforth hold doors open for people and fill pints right up to the top with only minimal foam and endeavour not to be a knob unless it's absolutely necessary. And I do hereby furthermore declare that getting bored in a universe this weird is unacceptable, and if that happens, I should probably take up the tuba or organise a water fight. We shall have bad days, yes? We shall have good days, yes? All the while remembering that most things in the universe don't even have fucking days at all. Even if it's all a facade, there is something on the inside that knows it's a thing. And that is the cat's pajamas. That is the veritable lobster's bottom. Oh, and there'll be hats, and free beer, and bouncy castles. And I will see you there, carbon units. Russivapur, Bjob, now gutte for all. It's 1687. Isaac Newton drops a right club banger called Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, introducing his physics of gravity. However, it could be argued, and it will be because I'm fucking going to, that perhaps his biggest leap was his idea that the rules down here on Earthworld are the same rules that are up there in Spaceworld. So if a theory of gravity works for apples, which never fell on his head by the way, that's bollocks, then it will work for stars, galaxies and black holes too. Sounds obvious enough to us living in the future, but it was revolutionary back then and it changed physics forever. And anyway, what did you ever do? Bugger all, probably, so just shut up. Anywho, that eventually led to the discovery of Big G, or G. G is the gravitational constant, and it guarantees that wherever you go in the universe, the attractive force of two objects will always be proportional to their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. The point, as far as we know, is that Big G never changes anywhere in the universe ever. It's a constant, and constants are important because the universe is as mad as a bucket of coked up ferrets, and depending on where you are or what you're doing, the speed of time can go wibbly, the local strength of gravity can change, denoted by little g, or G. Mass, momentum, everything is variable. We need things to hold on to if we want to know what the really real rules of the universe are. So if you're feeling social, let's meet some of the fundamental constants of reality, the rules that dictate everything. And the speed of light. Doesn't matter what you're doing, how fast you're going, or if you wish your girlfriend was hot like me, the speed of light in a vacuum never changes, far as we know. That means if you're going at 1 meter per second, then the speed of light is traveling this fast away from you, and if you're going at 298 million meters per second, then the speed of light is still traveling this fast away from you. If the speed of light doesn't change, ever, then everything else has to change around it, like time and distance, and that's partly where we get relativity. Anyway, it's called K, and it's a constant. Cool. 2. the fine structure constant. This is alpha. It basically denotes how strongly electromagnetism can fuck with charged stuff like protons and electrons, and it comes out as 137. That number is so fundamental to nature that if aliens contacted us, before we reply with nudes or pictures of cats, sending 137 might be the best proof to them that we are big boys and big girls now, and come say hello please. To there. Planck's constant. Planck gave us h, which basically defines the relationship between a wave or particle's frequency with its total energy. For one thing, it tells us that energy actually comes in little packets called quanta, and from that we also get the Planck length, mass, time, charge, and temperature. These are the master units of reality. They're not defined by silly human measurements, they're made of other constants. If there is a god, he's probably using these to boil his tea and put up his shelves. Theater. Finally, the mass of the proton and the electron are also good yardsticks for the universe, since they don't change as far as we know and they come in at these values, but I don't know what they are yet because I'm writing this script on the bus and I consider internet on mobile phones to be the pinnacle of millennial degeneracy. Now, that's all very interesting, you might say, but where do the constants get those values? Well, before we fail to answer that, it's not just the constants that are set up rather specifically in our universe, it's fucking everything. Hey, this is cool, huh? So, fundamentally, we live in three-dimensional space. Fuck! So, we live in three-dimensional space with one time dimension, which is fine, but it's not too silly to imagine a universe that could have been set up with only 2 spatial dimensions, or 4 even. And what would 4 look like? So, you have the usual vanilla X, Y, and Z axes, and let's add one more for funsies, called W. This is a 4th dimensional axis, so we've added a whole new dimension to space. Now, it's a bit difficult to conceive of because we're built for 3-dimensional thinking, but you can see as you vary the 4th dimension in the environment, everything goes a bit, to put it mathematically, totally up the fuck. So objects are moving through a dimension we can't see, and to us, disappearing. We know this is mathematically possible. You could have a universe that works like this, or with even more dimensions, but the point is, we don't know if 3 dimensions is the only spatial way to do things. We just happen to find ourselves living in a universe with them. Why is our universe only 3-dimensional with 1 time dimension as far as we're aware? No one has a clue. It's not self-evident. Time for a personal anecdote. As the icing on my genetic cake, I was born more or less blind in one eye, and worse, it would just wander off sometimes if it got bored. It really was a piece of shit. And in the prime of my adolescence, I felt a touch conscious about this. So I went to a doctor and asked, and he said, yeah, sure, let's get it sorted. Fun side note, what I didn't expect was that a while before the operation, to check you won't get double vision from the surgery, they inject Botox into you, surrounded by 15 very attractive student doctors while you try to pretend you're totally fine with a needle in your fucking eye! Anyway, a while later they put me to sleep and I woke up with some bandages, and then I didn't really have a lazy eye anymore. And that was it. A few months passed and the novelty wore off, and then I got to thinking, how did they put me to sleep anyway? What is this anesthesia nonsense? And I looked into it because I didn't know how anesthesia worked, and as it turned out, no one else fucking did either. We know general anesthesia stops vital areas of the brain talking to each other so you can't form memories, and we assume you're unconscious too, or we hope so. But we don't understand the mechanism yet, and I couldn't believe this. So we're using this thing thousands of times a day for opening people's skulls and rib cages and all sorts, and we don't even know how it works. And then you start to notice this pattern everywhere. The things we use and trust all the time without any knowledge of the mechanism behind them. Our languages, our medicines, the biology underlying sleeping, or what sleep is even for, consciousness, imagination, and then finally just the world. Why natural laws work or are there at all. We know they keep going, we know we can wrap them up in equations, but we don't have a clue what they are. Ever since then, I've never been able to let go of this horrible feeling that we're living on the top of this enormous iceberg, and we've drilled down like a foot into it, but there's still 400 miles of the thing below us that we can't see and we don't understand. Yet here we are, living on top of it, just going about our lives as though everything's fine. And it all comes back to the constants. Start with any phenomenon, the fizziness of lemonade, the collapse of the Qing dynasty, the antics of Juice Bigelow, male gigolo, and keep asking why it exists or why it happened, and eventually you'll come back to the fundamental physical constants, to the rules of reality. Every explanation stops somewhere, and it almost always stops here. So WTF, where do the constants come from then? Well, maybe God/digital overlords. Regardless of one's religious persuasion, it is possible that an intelligence set all this stuff up. On a similar note, it's getting all fashionable of late to suppose we're living in a simulated universe where physics is determined by someone or something else above us. Maybe. Presumably though, whoever's running the simulation also lives in a universe with laws, so what determined those laws then? Also, have you ever noticed every time we invent a new technology, that becomes the metaphor for everything now? If you've got a hammer, everything's a nail. Psychology used to be really into theories about compression and diversion of pressure. I wonder where those ideas came from. Likewise, recently we're getting really into the idea that lots of stuff is computation and simulation. I wonder where those ideas came from. No doubt we'll invent other clever stuff in a few decades, and that will be the new bee's knees in our theories. Just saying, reality is really complicated, and maybe we don't have the right metaphor yet. Maybe we do. Anyway, variation over time. Another possibility is that the constants aren't actually constant. They might be slowly getting stronger or weaker. This isn't that uncommon an idea, so the speed of light might be slowing down, for example. There's a whole class of these called VSL, variable speed of light theories. However, firstly, we don't have any definitive proof that the constants are varying yet. There is a possibility that alpha, the fine structure constant, is varying, but again, we don't know. The thing is, if the constants are constant, we don't know why yet. And if they aren't constant, we also don't know why yet. So maybe multiverses? A bunch of constants we found are set up in such a way that if they were just a little bit different, things would be catastrophic. For us, anyway. If gravity had been stronger or weaker by just 1 part in 10 to the 40th power, then stars probably wouldn't have formed at all. So why is our universe so cuddly and well made? Well, maybe there are squillions of other universes, all of them with slightly different constants. Why are the constants the ones we see? Because we live in this universe, not these ones. It doesn't then explain why there are squillions of other universes in the first place, but still, it's getting there. And finally, hard logicality. Another fun theory is that there's something special about our constants and our physics, that they're baked necessarily into reality. And I made the term up, so there's no point Googling it. Like, it's tricky to imagine a universe where pi doesn't dictate the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, unless that universe had a very weird and different geometry. It seems like pi is built into logic. The idea is that the mass of the electron, the electric charge of the top quark, the furniture of reality, all of this stuff also derives from logic somehow. That all of matter pops out of, say, pure geometry. And one day we'll find the necessary bridge between the two, and everything will be explained from the bottom up. Anyway, right now we know lots about what the rules of reality are, but almost nothing about why there are these rules. And it seems like we should be talking about that a bit, because if particles and waves and space and time and us are the marionettes, there is a ghost above the stage pulling the strings, dictating how they and we behave. And we don't know what that ghost is. Why is physics even here at all, and what the hell gave it its character? Einstein once said, "What really interests me is whether God had any choice in the creation of the world. As in, is this the only way you can make a universe? And what is the origin of the structure of reality?" Likewise, Edgar D. Mitchell was one of the 12 astronauts to walk on the moon, and he said the most amazing part of the trip was the return journey, when he was looking out of the window of the capsule and he could see the Earth and the moon and the sun, and he suddenly realized that every molecule in the spacecraft, in his body, in the other astronauts' bodies, had all originated from some ancient star, and he had this overwhelming sense of unity. It was all the same Lego bricks, all part of the same game, the same cosmic terms of service. And it's no different for you and I. Just having thoughts in the first place is made possible by electromagnetism conveying signals between the neurons in our brains, plus holding our molecules together, as well as the strong interaction kindly keeping the nuclei of our atoms, specifically the protons and neutrons, in place. Meanwhile, the curvature of space-time gravity has been keeping us from casually leaving the ground like Balloon Boy and going for a quick wander through a passing jet engine. Meanwhile, the weak force has been quietly keeping quarks transmuting, regulating the nuclear fusion that powers the stars, some of which, billions of years ago, prototyped all the carbon, nitrogen and oxygen in our bodies, allowing us to exist in the first place. And all of this has been facilitated by the fundamental constants of nature, obeying the speed of light, gravitational constant, and all the rest. The buttons the universe has done her coat up with. You know, I don't have the charisma, looks, or predilection for orgies required to start a cult, but if I did, we'd need something to dislike. And that would be this weird recreational cynicism one comes across sometimes, that the world is boring and everything's been discovered. Has it? Has it fucking really? Oh, I must have been on the toilet when that particular ontological memo came through. Isn't it nicer and just more honest in a way to admit we don't have a handle on anything yet? That there's nothing normal about reality, it's just an insane jigsaw puzzle devised by a madman that's persisted long enough for us to accept as routine. And in a predictably ungrateful fashion, we still somehow invented a word for boredom. I don't know if you're having a shit time right now. Maybe work sucks, or you're in a pinch, or whatever, and I'm really sorry to hear that. But may I recommend that it is possible to put stuff into perspective just for a moment by remembering that every atom in your body is the direct result of universal laws we have no idea to the origin of. That there is, in plain sight, a mystery called everything, and nothing is self-evident, and really, if we're honest, we don't even have a clue what the fuck reality is doing here in the first place. One day, Mr. Sun and Mr. Wind were having an argument about who was stronger when they spotted a man walking along the road. They challenged one another to see who could get the man to remove his coat. Well, it was Mr. Wind's turn first, and Mr. Wind said, "Right lads, let's fucking rush him," and began to blow and blow, but despite all of this, the man only buttoned his coat tighter, and Mr. Wind blew some more until he was exhausted. But now it was Mr. Sun's turn. Unlike Mr. Wind, Mr. Sun was very modest and restrained, and said, "Right, you dopey cunt," and began to shine and shine, all the while quietly whispering, "Take off your fucking coat, you stupid cunt." And the day got warmer and warmer, and sure enough, the man took off his coat, proving once and for all that it's always nicer just to be nice. Well, Mr. Sun was rather pleased with himself, as you can imagine. "Oi, you see that, you fucking wind cunt?" And the day continued to warm up, and the man took off his t-shirt because it was hot. And next he took off his trousers, revealing a number of politically reprehensible tattoos. And Mr. Wind said, "Look what you've done, you stupid sun cunt! Look what you've gone and fucking done!" For a very long time, many of us believed that the Earth was at the center of the solar system, called geocentrism. And to be fair, it does kinda look that way from the ground if you don't know better. But plenty of people in history pushed for a sun at the center model called heliocentrism. One proponent was a rather clever 16th century philosopher called Giordano Bruno. He also believed that stars were distant suns with their own planets. In the 1500s, remember. A normal idea today, pretty wackadoodle back then. Anyway, the Catholic Church of the day were big supporters of Bruno's heliocentric ideas and celebrated his genius by lighting a big lovely bonfire, which they popped him on top of. Centuries later, in the early 1900s, and scientist Alfred Wegener noticed that the continents fit together a bit like an awkward jigsaw puzzle, particularly East and South America and Western Africa. He came up with a theory of continental drift, the idea that the continent started as one big megamass called Pangaea and slowly drifted apart over millions of years. "Hey, that's a great idea," no geologist of the day said, and continued to fling intellectual shit at him non-stop for the remainder of his life. It would take about 70 years, or one Bill Murray, for folks to realize he was actually spot on. Kind of difficult to apologize though, what with him being dead and everything. September 15th, 1999, and the Mars Climate Orbiter is just about to enter Mars orbit. It does, though with a little too much enthusiasm, barbecuing itself. The reason? Because the spacecraft was quite sensibly using metric measurements, while the software back on Earth was using imperial. I can sympathize somewhat. Having left England years ago, I'm still only able to conceive of the world in terms of stone, inches, and repressed childhood sadness. Anyhow, that's all just the beginning, really, because the history of human civilization is one long failure of critical thinking. Like the time humans invited a big wooden horsey into Troy. Like the time humans killed Julius Caesar in an attempt to save the Roman Republic and killed the Roman Republic. Like the time humans prescribed cocaine to treat hay fever, and meth as a diet pill, and heroin as a cough syrup to children. Like the time humans repeatedly kept insisting on invading Russia during the winter. It's far too cold, wear a fucking hat. Or some nice booties. Or maybe some fucking gloves! We are not a species built for critical thinking. Just to illustrate the scale of the problem, is this a duck or a bunny? Or which of the two orange circles is bigger? The one on the left or the one on the right? Neither, they're both the same size. Likewise, which is rotating faster, the sphere or the column in the center? Neither, it's a still image, your brain is kindly animating it for you. And finally, if you run your eyes over each of these cat pictures, is there one in particular that stands out? The answer is this one, obviously, because she's my cat and she's fucking gorgeous, and these are just silly optical illusions that trip us up. How the hell are we supposed to see true reality when it comes to things that actually matter in our lives? Well, for as long as we've been trying to grapple with old Johnny reality, there has been an enemy sabotaging us at every turn. They live in our brain bits, and they are called logical fallacies. The correlation fallacy, for example. We live in a world now swamped in data and numbery wombas, and it makes it very tempting to look for correlations. One that took a shamefully long time to admit was the now obvious link between death sticks and lung cancer. Then again, careful there, Chuckles. There's also a highly compelling correlation between the number of people who drowned by falling into swimming pools from 1999 onwards and the number of films around that time Nicolas Cage appeared in. Correlation does not necessarily imply causation. Begging the question, this is the Ouroboros of bullshit logic. Someone declares, "I own your house now." You respond, "Why?" They respond, "Because I have your keys." "Why do you have my keys?" "I already told you, Jerko. Because I own your house." You will see this all the time in public debates. Very weak tea indeed. The slippery slope. Perhaps you suggest to someone that it might be time for them to give up snorting detergent. A slippery slope response would be, "Well, what do I give up next? Shoes? Then water? Then breathing? Is that what you want?"